Welcome to How People Move People, a podcast about the impact that our words, art, stories, and lives have on each other. Each series' journey unfolds in a sequence of 6 episodes. This series, titled Trace Elements, is hosted by Solís, a Honduran Madrid-based culture writer and researcher who explores the impact left by artists, both dead and living, who were impacted by the HIV/AIDS epidemic that continues today. Solís traveled between the Americas and Europe to gather stories of men and trans women. We honor their stories in their first languages, offering half of this series in English and half in Spanish.
My name is Phil Chan. I'm the co-founder of Final Bow for Yellowface. I'm an educator, an advocate, a choreographer, a director, and an author. So I first learned about Choo San's work through the Washington Ballet, and he always stuck out in my mind as like, oh, here's this this door has been opened before, but I didn't really know too much about his history or his legacy, and it was, really doing this advocacy work with Final Bow for Yellowface, really trying to improve Asian representation, that I started consciously asking myself, okay, well, let's make some lists. Who are our people? Who are our trailblazers? Who has come before? And just realizing, wow, Choo San made work everywhere. Like he was making ballets for American Ballet Theater for Baryshnikov in the 80s. He was the resident choreographer of a major American ballet company. He did a full-length Romeo and Juliet for Boston Ballet. I mean, he was working in Europe and the United States. And here was this really high caliber artist who is starting to move in these really big ways and working literally for everybody. And why did I not know about him in the same way that I knew, Jerome Robbins or Joffrey or Agnes DeMille or these other great American choreographers, Alvin Ailey? Why was Choo San's name not in that class? And you dig a little bit deeper into his story, and you see that there was, he was an artist who was just coming into his prime, finding his individual voice, unique voice, something that inspired and got a lot of people excited, that was even, despite the racial barriers in place already, just so undeniably talented that it just it didn't matter. It was just the work spoke for itself. Those barriers that are still in place that I face myself, he was just so good that it didn't matter. And then he was taken away just at his prime. And so, you can't help but wonder what more time would have given us, what kind of work, what kind of questions, what kind of answers, especially as a queer Asian man too, that was also, just the images of sort of, asexual or hypersexual Asian men, in our popular discourse. It's either one or the other. And to be seen as an artist, to be seen with nuance, just was incredible for him, just really incredible. And so a lot of my work is, and then, as I was digging deeper, realizing that he started a foundation, and the idea of the foundation was that the royalties from his ballet would go to support the next generation of choreographers. And that was like, wow, I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. This is already, a path. So as we're working with the Gold Standard Arts Foundation, which is the sort of next iteration of Final Bow for Yellowface, where we're looking to really be that service organization for Asian American creatives in dance, to offer choreographic fellowships, to offer resources to the community, to be that hub. It's like, oh, he was already thinking that. He was already trying to do that and set that up. And so it feels in some way like we're being passed the baton that wasn't able to be handed to us. We're picking up the baton that's been dropped, which, as you know, is a lot harder than if someone just hands it right into your hand and says, keep running. We had to stop and pick it up before we could keep running. So yeah, I mean, but also just like how affirming for our work, to say somebody has been here before. This door has been opened. It might feel like it's locked. It's just very heavy, but it's unlocked. So just keep pushing. And what a gift that is, if nothing else.
Sorry for the abrupt shift, but dance and the world of choreography is obviously very inclusive and can be a safe space for queer people and LGBTQI plus people. So as a historian, I guess, and as someone who knows very well the history of dance in America, can you just share some impressions about what you think the HIV epidemic did to dance? Because I wonder if you ever look at it as, someone who is much younger and someone who did not have to, who didn't go through the same things that people like, the people why I'm doing this series had to go through, where like suddenly like this beautiful space was threatened by this virus that people didn't understand, that people didn't know how to make sense of, and how that suddenly became like a place that didn't feel as safe, I guess, anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think the AIDS epidemic really wiped out a generation on both sides of the footlights. So when we talk about institutional knowledge, I mean, even just as audience members, right? Like dressing up, looking amazing, going to the opera, going to the ballet, being educated, being able to actually, there was a culture of being educated and learning and developing a point of view and developing a taste. People argue about which rapper that they like better, and it used to be which opera soprano they loved more, like that level of dialogue. Are you a Nicki girl? Are you Doja Cat? Like what's, who's better? We used to do that, with dancers and opera singers, and it was just a different time and a different layer. So we have these art forms that do present some barriers, that are it's hard to get into. You do require a little education to be comfortable walking into an opera or a ballet, and there were other queer people in those spaces who could bring you along. And suddenly, even just from the audience side, that's gone. So there isn't like, there were very few of that next generation saying, "Hey, kid, come here. Let me take you to an opera. Let me show you what this is. Let me give you a piece of your soul that's, available to you in this art form." And so just as an audience member, we lost that, and we're now having to work to consciously rebuild that culture. And it's not, it's an effort, right? Like you need to get like my current gay boys to be like, "Girl, I just bought a block of tickets to the Met. We are gonna go see Agnan. You are gonna see Anthony Roth Constanza. Come down that staircase naked as a queen. Yes, mama, you're going to love it." And like it takes that level of bringing them in to get them to see, wow, like I said, this is a part of my soul that I can have access to. And that's just the audience side, man. Like look at the artistic talent, on the other side of the footlights that we lost. I mean, potential choreographers, artistic leaders, composers, just so many people, dancers, performers, right? Like incredible artists that we lost on stage, that not only we lost them for what they could give, but also the influence they could have on the next generation of artists. And if you think about how art and ballet especially is transmitted, it's a ballet. I mean, the word culture really is a good word for that. Like, I like to think about it as like sourdough bread, like especially in dance, which is an oral art form. Like, you have to take a little bit of the past generation. You know, an older dancer will come to you and say, this is the step, but if you breathe right here, it's easier. You know, actually, if you push harder right here, you're not going to make it. You have to finesse this moment. Or here's an analogy, here's a visual that's going to help you with making the audience feel right here. Or, oh, you're crying too soon. You know, give it another moment. Hear this in the music. Wait until that moment. And that's when you get the audience, you know? So those little secrets, those little tips and tricks, the magic passed down from one generation to the next that you can't capture in a video, those little secrets were lost. And, you know, it's so different than I think other art forms, you know, like plays or music even, that have a written notation. There is dance notation. It's cumbersome, it's expensive, but it still doesn't quite get to the feeling of a work. It's just, dance is just one of those things. You know, everybody has a body, but you can't quite put into words when you see an incredible, you know, performer. And so how do you get that magic? Yeah, some of it's talent, but a lot of it is hard work, you know, and someone, a direction to teach you how to work, and someone to help you. And so to not have that generation, you know, is a disservice, and it limits several generations out for what can really happen. You know, because then if I'm missing that information, I'm less wealthy to pass on to the next, you know? And so there is a ripple down effect through the generations that, yeah, something is lost.
So that's an exhilarating and heartbreaking discovery to meet someone that you can't get to have a conversation with, right? And it's like, yeah, like, he was here, and now unfortunately I can't talk to him, but I know that he existed, and that gives me some comfort and solace. So you can get as technical as you want with what I'm about to ask, but what kind of questions would you ask him if you were able to have a conversation with him?
I think I am having a conversation with him, and it is through his work. You know, we are planning with the Kennedy Center to dedicate a program that honors Asian choreography. So this is a choreographic festival that is dedicated to Asian choreographers who are making work right now. So we don't need Swan Lake. We don't need anything that's old. It's literally new work from our community. And the fact that we as an industry are able to even offer these programs that were not available a generation ago, right? So the fact that we have major American companies commissioning this work and that we can do it on a festival together is already speaking volumes. And our sort of gala program is dedicated to Choo San. So we're looking to both bring revivals of his work forward, but also have Asian American artists now respond to that work and highlight the work we're doing now. So in many ways, I did not meet this person. I claim no ownership of this person. But I think just by placing my feet in the same steps that he did, in the same ecosystem, with the same idea of seeing a similar vision of how it could be bigger for more people, I think just that shared energy gives me some connection to just another person. This is just another fellow human being who had a life and had a journey, and we are connected by our spirits, if not by blood or by knowing each other. But I think I feel that desire very strongly in my own work of wanting to have that be bigger and have that be an opportunity. So we are having a discussion, but also being Chinese, I'm very I feel very strongly about family and the connections of that. So in touch with Choo San's family and creating an opportunity for them to also continue his legacy is very important. So the people who knew him and loved him best are able to know that people are still talking about him and want to see his work and want to ask questions. So I don't know what he would say as an individual in this moment. But as a person who is treading this similar path, I think he would be very happy that he is not the only one, and that there's so many others now that we can do a full program. And what a burden it is off of us to have to be the first or the only one when we can just be celebrating each other as a community. So I think that's probably, I would say, what the spirit of this work feels.
My name is Graham Lustig. I'm the artistic director of the Oakland Ballet. Oakland Ballet celebrating its 58th year of existence, and I'm the artistic director, and I also contribute to the repertoire with choreography. If Choo San was with us today, I think he would be a leading choreographer, world-renowned, but also a leading director. And as a director, I think he would have cut a different path forwards for ballet in this country, whichever company he was with, but if it was the Houston Ballet, I think he would have created a pathway for other choreographers and other dancers to follow him. People like Phil Chan would have had this. Choo San would have been there at the top of the mountain, and Phil, as a young dancer, would have seen him and said, oh, I can become a director, I can become an international choreographer. So there's that representation that was lost, and I think would have been very, very valuable, especially to the world of ballet, which has not been as embracing of diversity as it could have been. And then on a personal note, 1987 was when Choo San passed away, and he had discovered an aria from, it's an aria sung by Delilah to Samson and Delilah. And it's a beautiful aria. And he would play this, and we would listen to this, and he would become very, very emotional. And so I cannot hear that song, that aria, and not be transported to a warehouse apartment in Chelsea in 1987 in New York City. The apartment he had not even finished the apartment before he passed away. He was still renovating the space. And so that is a thing that when I listen to it, it's a beautiful emotional song, and I just feel comforted to have had this moment and this song that so strongly makes me think of him.
Thank you for that. Thank you. If you don't mind talking about this, would you mind sharing how, if at all, did the coronavirus pandemic make you think or remind you about what it was like to be in the 80s and early 90s when when HIV/AIDS became an epidemic, basically, and we lost so many people that should be here today?
Dancing through the AIDS pandemic was extremely confronting because we lost so many people. So many young people around us who appeared to be in fine physical form, loose, supple, strong, amazing dancers. It didn't AIDS epidemic didn't stop us working. We weren't isolated. We were dancing together. And then someone didn't come to work. And you didn't know. And in some cases, people were dead in 6 weeks. And that deep shock, and as a practicing homosexual, you had this incredible question: am I going to get it? Or do I already have it? You know, and early, not much was known about the precautions that one needed to take. So that's where isolationism, I think, occurred. You just became so afraid to have any kind of physical contact. It was easier to self-isolate and not to be physical. And so that level of fear was very palpable, and it seemed to be all around us. And of course, you know, working in the ballet, there were all sorts of other artists around, designers, musicians, composers. We even lost crew, stage crew. So the sense of grief for that during that time, and now, I don't know, a sense of grief that still exists is very strong. And I think I have tried to stay positive with a celebration of life, with a celebration of having this wonderful friendship with Choo San, of being so incredibly proud of his success and being close to that success and living that a little bit, you know, through him. And so I kind of want to stay in that place, because it's a dark place if you go and think about everybody that we lost and what would they have become had they still been alive today. And you can't help but ask the question, well, why didn't it happen to me? I'm not suggesting I'm drowning in survivor's guilt, but you cannot, you know, live through that and not ask yourself afterwards, you know, I lost my brother to AIDS. I lost a former lover to AIDS. I lost Choo San to AIDS, my best friend. And of course, many other people. Yeah, so it was a very, very difficult time to live through. And I know that through the coronavirus pandemic, people have also lost loved ones, especially in the older generations, but even younger people have been taken. And in a way, tragically, there was a period early on with HIV/AIDS when little was known and patients died untouched in isolation. If you remember, if you know of that time. And tragically, we have just experienced through the pandemic where people were in the ICU and incubated, and eventually, you know, there was no hope for them and they died in isolation. Their families couldn't hold their hand. They couldn't have anybody close to them. And my heart goes out to them and to all of those people who have lost somebody dear to them through this terrible disease that has taken millions from our planet. So I'm sorry, it's somber. I don't have a bright side to this question, to this answer for you. I'm just filled with a lot of grief and sadness, but be that from 30, 40 years ago or even from now. So yeah, I definitely think there's a resonance between what happened then and has happened recently. I don't think we're even, I mean, I haven't had enough time to process. I'm still in that, trying to find out, understand, take perspective, learn, grow. And so it does bring you closer again to that feeling of live your best life, love your day, live with grace, live with joy, appreciate the beauty.
You mentioned, he was rare in being, again, like a rare AAPI person who's an artistic director and who gets to choreograph pieces. Was that something that he talked about? Was it something, present in his everyday life? The weight of that, the loneliness of that in so many ways. Because it's both beautiful and an honor, but it can be very isolating.
That's a good question. And I think if you transport back to the Dutch National Ballet, where Choo San was a dancer, and I was a dancer too. I joined the Dutch National Ballet, and he was already in the company. He was about 5 years older than me. So the interesting thing about Dutch National Ballet, big European company, 85 dancers, based in Amsterdam, in Holland, was that it was a very diverse company. We had nationals from all over the world, from Mexico, from Spain, from France, from Eastern Europe, from Suriname, from Indonesia. So it was a multiracial company. And the truth of the matter is, back in the 1970s, we weren't talking about that. No one was looking at, how many soloists are, BIPOC. It was just, you had talent. Choo San was cast in ballets, but never in a pejorative fashion. He was tall, but very thin. He had a very narrow rib cage, very narrow hips. He had long, thin legs, long, thin arms. And when choreographers worked with him, they used his unique physique, the angles in his body to advantage to show off, what the amazing way that he would move, the unique way that he would move. And so I never heard Choo San say, "Oh, I'm the only Singaporean choreographer working in ballet." It just didn't ever come forwards. I can say, if I may, that we were roommates. We never had a relationship, but I loved him deeply, just like a really best buddy. And even though he left Dutch National early because he had a back injury, he was invited to go to Washington to become the resident choreographer with Washington Ballet by Mary Day, who was the artistic director. We stayed in close touch. I had quite generous summer breaks, usually 6 weeks. So I would come to America, stay with him, either in Washington, either in New York. We did some travel around the States, came to San Francisco. So I followed his career. And when the Paris Opera Ballet did a piece and I could get there, I was there for the premiere, etc. So we stayed pretty closely connected until he passed away. And I think, if Choo San had lived, he had been invited by Ben Stevenson to become the resident choreographer at the Houston Ballet. I think if he accepted that offer, he probably, in time, when Mr. Stevenson would retire, he might have become the director of the Houston Ballet. He was already working at an international level before he passed away. And again, I don't think Mikhail Baryshnikov chose Choo San because he wanted to be representative. I do the same as you. I think that he saw this great talent that he wanted to celebrate and commission a new work for American Ballet Theatre. Dance Theatre of Harlem did his work, of course, Washington Ballet, Royal Swedish Ballet, Boston Ballet did a Romeo and Juliet he created. I mean, he was working at the top level of dance companies. And it's a tragedy that he was taken so early and left a void behind him that nobody truthfully has filled in these many years since 1987.
There's something really beautiful about watching him move, and there's a very architectural beauty to his body in a way that, I'm sorry if this isn't, again, like trying to talk about dance is so difficult, but it's kind of like watching the Empire State moving, which is like both like imposing but also so graceful, and it's majestic but also so light and so ethereal. What was it like to see him move in the real world?
Right.
What was it like in the gut, I guess?
So as a dancer, performing the Spanish dance in Swan Lake, right? Nothing extraordinary, not a role that was created for him, or a Balanchine ballet. Choo San was a mixture of things. As I mentioned, he was extremely skinny, long lines, but he was also powerfully strong. He loved dynamic. He loved dynamic when he was teaching. He loved dynamic when he was choreographing, and he loved dynamic as a performer. And you could really see his musicality, his keen musicality expressed in nuances, at every moment that he danced. So even though he was reed thin, he was strong, ox strong, that combination of being looking fragile, but having a lot of power. That was a very beguiling mixture to watch. He also, I suppose I would say, was a real performer. He wasn't on stage trying to be adored by the audience. He was on stage to be himself, to be strong, to present who he wanted to be in a very unique and authentic fashion. And again, that came out more in the choreography that was created for him by the Dutch choreographers. So those are, it's hard to put into words, isn't it, how someone danced. And I'm also remembering this from a very long time ago, when I was in my 20s. But these are the things that have been left behind. These are the traces that stay there. He also had a sense of fun, of course, about him too. So he could be silly and foolish and light. It wasn't always the strong drama that I'm trying to describe here. There's a sense of lightness about the work.
That's very important. There's a playfulness to it as well.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure that many people have asked this, and many people have noted this, but it was so interesting to see that he was in biochemistry that he studied, right?
Yes, indeed.
And then you see the pieces that he choreographed, and there's almost like they have been distilled, almost like a scientist using a microscope, right? It's movement distilled to its essence. Did he ever talk about what it had been like to go to, to have a degree in actual biochemistry? Because that's wild.
He spoke about it because he couldn't from his parents, he was not allowed to become a dancer unless he got the degree first. So they made him go through that. Now, you know that he comes from a dancing dynasty, right? His Choo Chiat, his older brother, then Su Ni, sister, then Su Kim, and Choo San was the last. But all four of them danced. So I think that my own observation is that when Choo San was making work, like doing a workshop piece, like Impressions Past, he made a trio in Holland before he went to America. And I was in the studio watching him create that every day. This was just a more spiritual, poetic, lyrical piece. But as his confidence grew as a choreographer, he became more essential to himself, an essence of himself, in the same way that you can describe, how a chemist might work down to, the chemical components behind something. I feel like, the more that he, for instance, he made Birds of Paradise to the Ginastera harp concerto with very idiosyncratic arm movements, especially for the women, which took them, some people would say it was, his Chinese background. I'm not so sure. I see it more as his essential self. And then, he did Unknown Territory as well. And these works, I think, were the most secure works of his expression, of his own authenticity. I can't say it. Authenticity and his own, how he felt about movement. But of course, he had the mathematician's mind because of the intricate ways that he could create patterns using canon in different groups that would somehow or other, like a kaleidoscope, turn into something else in front of you. And you just enjoyed these patterns unfolding, you know?
I was born in 1986, so part of why I'm doing this is like Phil, you know, there's so many people that I wish I could have met and that I could have known, and I'm trying to just like do a small part, just keeping them alive. So thank you.
Yes,
I appreciate
you're welcome
so much.
I hope it didn't sound too sentimental. I try to balance. You know, it's easy to fall into sentimentality, but we were really close. You know, I mean, like brothers. And we did everything. We were out together. We were out the clubs together. You understand? I mean, we lived a good life.
How People Move People is brought to you by the National Center for Choreography at the University of Akron, or NCC Akron. This podcast is produced by Jennifer Edwards. James Sleeman is our editor. Theme music by Ellis Rovin. Transcription by Arushi Singh. Cover art by Micah Kraus. I'm Eduardo Villaro, Artistic Director and CEO of Ballet Hispanico, and an NCC Akron board member. Special thanks to the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation for their continued support of NCC Akron programming like this. To learn more about NCC Akron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCC Akron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for How People Move People.